Thank you. First off, thanks for joining this Zoom today. Hopefully you will learn a lot about Excel. In my basic class that we did earlier this month, we covered some things like freeze pane, formatting, inserting a row, inserting a column, inserting a sheet, renaming a sheet, and doing some basic formulas. So if that is the type of topics that you need, then I would refer you back to that Zoom video. Today we're going to take it a step further. We're going to start with mail merge, and then we're going to move into what's called absolute values, also text functions, countif, and charting, and if there's time, I'll do some VLOOKUPs. So we got a lot to cover today. I'm going to kind of go fast, but the good thing is that this is all recorded, so you'll be able to go back and see yourself and see what I did at a slower pace. Again, just a reminder that these files are available to you. The URL is tinyurl.com/Excel May 21st or May 21, excuse me. And you can, again, either follow along or just watch, and we'll get started, okay? So the first thing that I want to show you today is something called conditional formatting. So on my screen right now, what I have is some data that has come through and that I've pulled out from our student information system, Q. And basically, I have the first column is first name, second column is last name, address, and so on. And then you can also see there's scores for English language arts and mathematics. These are just made up scores. They're not real, so we can kind of show you that data. But a lot of times what will happen is we'll pass out documentation like this and say, okay, analyze this data, and I want to know what students really struggled on the English language arts test and what students really struggled on math, so that we can make small group and do small group instruction with those students. Well, if I just gave you this data, it's going to be a little bit difficult for you to kind of make sure that you are looking at the right kids. So I'm going to show you a little tool that's called conditional formatting. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to highlight the numbers or the scores that are in the English language arts. So you can see I just clicked on 335 and selected all the way down. And on the Home tab, there is something called conditional formatting. And if I click on that, there are some rules that are already set up for you. You can actually have it highlight some things. You can do top 10%, top bottom 10%. You can do data bars, and I'll just show you what that does. If I choose a data bar, you can see that the larger the number, the larger the bar, so you can kind of see that. You can do color scales. Now, color scales will take it and break it up into different colors, and that's kind of what we're going to do, but we're going to do it on our own instead of having Excel do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a rule. And so right here it says new rule. So I'm going to click on new rule, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to say format only cells based on their value. So you can see that that is highlighted. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say we're going to do this, and we're going to choose the highest value and the lowest value. And actually, I'm going to come here and I'm going to choose format only cells that contain. And I'm going to look at the cell value, and I'm going to say, okay, if the score is less than 300, And notice I typed in cell value less than 300. Then I click on Format. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do Fill. And I'm going to say, let's make those red. And if I hit OK here, and then I hit OK again, what this does is it basically went through my data and it looked at all of the numbers that were less than 300 and it colored it red. So right away, those are the kids that I know did not do very well on the English language arts test. I can come in here and I can add a second rule if I want, but again, just following the same process that I did. Conditional formatting, format only cells that contain, and this time I'm going to say between 300 and 370. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to format those yellow. And we're going to hit OK, and we're going to hit OK, and you'll notice that the numbers that are between 300 and 370 are now yellow. And then if I wanted to, I could go in here again and I could say manage rule again, and then I can say this time I want numbers that are larger than 370. We're going to make those green. So basically I've just repeated that, and so now you can see that my data has gone through and has color coded those, and so right away I can see the kids that struggled on this test, at least with English language arts. The other thing that I can do with this is once I have this built, I can then also go in and do a filter on this, and I showed filter in the previous video, but I can come in here and I can actually filter by color. So if I want to see all of the kids that were red, I can come in here and filter by color and say choose red, and there are all of the kids that scored below 300, and I can make a quick group out of those, and you'll notice that all of the other kids are filtered out. I can come up here and I can turn that filter off, and then my data comes back. So you can see that that's a real quick way to make it so that it kind of pops for you, and it makes it available so that you can see it in a much easier way. Instead of really having to go through and look at the numbers, it kind of pops for you so that you can see it right away. I could do the same thing with mathematics, and then I could compare the two. But I'm not going to do that, but you get the idea on conditional formatting.
There is a quick question. I don't know if everybody's monitoring the chat, but the chat was, and the question was, can you do both columns at one time?
Yes, I could have. I could have done that. Yep. All I would have had to do was select both columns at the same time, come up and do my rule, and then it would have worked the same way. Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. The next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to show you mail merge. And mail merge is, I want to take this and I want to send a letter or an email or even or make labels on this based on this information. And to do this, you actually have to use Word instead of Excel, but it still works with Excel. So I'm going to close this out real quick, and then I'm going to open up my Word. And it's opening up on a different screen. Oops, I hit Outlook. No, wrong one. Try this again. And let me bring this over here so that you can see it. There we go. And you'll notice in Word, there is something that is called mailings. And if I come here to mailings, one of the things that I have is I have envelopes, labels, and then there's this one called Start Mail Merge. And that's really what I want to do on this. I want to do a mail merge. So if I click on Start Mail Merge, you'll notice that I can make a letter. I can do an email, a message. I've used this a lot if I'm sending out a lot of emails to people, basically it's the same email, but I want it to be personalized. It'll say, Dear Sherry, and then the second one will say, Dear Chris, and the information will be merged from an Excel spreadsheet. I can make envelopes, I can do labels and things like that. This one, though, is the best place to start, where it says step-by-step mail merge wizard. So I'm going to click on that. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to be able to do a mail merge in 6 different steps. And it will take you step by step through this. And you'll notice that down here it says step 1 of 6. And it says, what type of documents do you want to make? Well, in this case, we're going to make labels. So I'm going to choose labels here. And then it says, print address labels for a mailing group. Click next to continue. So down here, I'm going to click next. So now I'm already on step 2. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to choose my label options. So I'm going to click on this, and it will open up a window that basically lets me choose the type of labels that I want. And they have all kinds of different ones. They have from Avery. They have different, depending on if you're using 3M. Most people use Avery US letter ones. A lot of people use the 5260. So I can look for the 5260s in here. And I can just kind of scroll down and find them. But usually it tells you what kind of label it is. But if I come down here, there's the 5160, and then there's also the 5260. That's probably the ones that most people use. So in this case, I'm going to go with the 5260s. I find it. Okay, click on it. And then I'm going to hit OK. And you'll notice that basically the 5260s are the labels that are 3 across and 10 down. So there's 30 on a sheet. And you'll also notice that mine has grid lines on this. Sometimes when you do this, the grid lines don't come in. I find them very helpful. So if that happens to you, after you click on your label choices, if you come up to layout up at the top here and click layout and then click view grid lines, that'll bring those back on. So it would look like this if you don't have grid lines, and then if you click on this, it will bring in the grid lines. So then I'm ready for the next step. And so I'm going to go down here and I'm going to go to next step. The next step says select recipients. It says use an existing list, or you can type your own. I'm going to use an existing list, and I'm going to use that practice Excel data file that I had open earlier. So I'm going to come here to browse, and then I'm going to go find that file. Well, that file is in a folder here called Bootcamp, and it'll be different for you. But here is my file. So I'm going to open that file, and it's going to ask me, what sheet do you want it to look at? Do you want it to look at the first sheet, sheet 1, sheet 2, or the one that's called practice data? Well, all my information is in practice data sheet. So I'm going to choose that one. I'm going to hit OK. And basically what that did was it opened up my Excel spreadsheet that is in that folder. And you can see basically it's the same names that I had before. I have the last name, first name, city, state, address, and then also their scores in mathematics and also in English language arts. You'll notice that it's checked, that all of these are checked. If I wanted to exclude 1 or 2 people from this, I could uncheck them and they would not be included in my mail merge. But I'm going to include everybody on this, so I'm going to hit OK. So after I hit OK, you'll notice that Word has actually gone through and put this little bracket next record on all of my labels except for the first one. And basically what that's doing is it's giving it a code that says, okay, go to the next line, go to the next line, go to the next line, and so on. So we're going to set up our labels. So now we're ready to move on to the next step. And if I come down here, I'm going to click on Next, Arrange Your Labels. And you'll notice here that we have a number of choices. We have something called an address block. We have a greeting line. We have a postage, electronic postage, or we could do more items. On more items, I could actually physically pick the fields that I want to include on my mail merge, and I would be able to set them that way. So if I maybe wanted to do a mail merge and have those ELA scores and those math scores on there, I would go to more items and use those fields. I'm not going to do that. We're just going to do an address block. So I'm going to choose the address block right here, and it's going to try and create one for me. And if you look at this, it says, okay, insert the name in this format. It's going to do first name, last name, and if there's a suffix, do that. I could just do first name if I wanted to. I could come down here, I could do Mr. or Miss, but I'm just going to do this one. And then I'm going to, it has it checked, insert postal address. I'm going to choose that. And then also format address according to region and country and region, which is what I'm looking at here. But it gives me a preview here. And if I look at this, I've got the first name, AS, I've got the last name, Emmer, and then I've got Fresno, California, 937200000. And the problem is on this, I don't have the address for this person, the actual address. So somehow when I did this, it didn't match exactly on the fields that I had. So I'm not quite happy with what is right here. So I'm going to go and click on Match Fields right here. And you'll see that the first name is pulling from the first name column. The last name is pulling from the last name. There is no suffix, there's no company, but address 1, it's not matched. So if I click on address 1 and I look at my choices here, I have first name, last name, address, line 1, city, state, and zip. If I come down, I know that my addresses are in the column address that are address line 1. So I'm going to choose that, and then I'm going to hit OK. When I do that, now notice my preview here. I have AS Emmer and then 8851 North Sierra Vista Avenue, Fresno, California, and the city and the state and the zip code. So now it looks like it's right. So I'm going to hit OK. And so notice that it now put the address block field right here. It's taking that information and it's going to be putting it into my Word document. Now, the next thing I need to do is I need to get the address block on all of these other labels. So what I do is once I'm happy with this, I can click Update All Labels. And if I do that, you'll notice that now on every label there is an address block next to the next record. My next thing is I can come down to step 5, which is next, which is preview my label. And if I do that, you'll notice that I can preview my label right here, and there are all my labels for all of my students' information here. Now, if I see that I made a mistake, I can always go back to the previous and change it. If I want to add something, so for example, let's say I want to add in front here to the parents of, and then my address block. So notice I did that, but if I hit preview, that's only going to do that for that one. I have to update all my labels, and notice now I have to the parents of and then the address block. So now when I do my preview, you'll see that I have to the parents of. Now you'll notice that these are all caps and what I typed was not all caps. There's ways to fix that and we'll show you that in a little bit, but I just want you to get the idea of how to do a mail merge. And then if I'm completely happy with this, I can go to my next here where it says complete the merge. And then I can actually go here and click print. And I put my labels in my printer and then it would print these labels. So a real quick way of doing labels, addresses, once you have it in Excel. Are there any questions about mail merge before I move on?
None in the chat right now.
Okay. All right. Well, then I'm going to move on a little bit. Let's see. I'm going to go back to my Excel document. So I'm going to close this out. I'm not going to save it. I'm going to go back to my Excel document that I had before, and I'm going to show you a feature called paste special values. And this is kind of an important little tool that I use actually quite a lot. So again, I'm going back to that beginning Excel training document. Let me make this a little bigger for you so you can see it. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a formula that is going to add the English language arts scores and the math scores together. And I'm going to put it in this column I. And so I'm just going to use, and this is going to be a little bit of a review from my last class, I'm just going to use the formula that is sum. So to start a formula, what you do is you use the equal sign, and you type the word sum, S-U-M, and then parentheses, and then I'm going to choose these two values. And so I came over here and I clicked in G2 and I dragged over to H2, and you'll notice that it put it in there for me and it said G2 to H2, and then I have to do close parentheses. I hit enter and you'll notice that it added all of those two numbers together and give me 657. So in doing that, what I want to do is I want to do that all the way down. So if I can drag this down, but I showed this in the beginning class, all you have to do is come over here, choose the cell that you want, and then come over and just double click on the lower right-hand corner of the cell, and it will fill all the way down for you. So you'll notice that now it's adding up each of these, and again, it's dynamic. So if I change my math score here to 250, notice that the 657 changes to 585. Now, one of the things that I showed last time in the beginning class was a real handy-dandy shortcut in Excel called undo, because there are going to be times where you make mistakes, and so undo is Control and Z at the same time, and if you hit Control Z, it will undo what you just did. So you notice that it just undid what I did. But the problem is that this value is dynamic. So if I wanted to take these cells and move them over and paste them, over here, you'll notice that the numbers come through, but there are times where it's not going to calculate it correctly because it's looking at different cells. This one did it right. But there are times where I want this to be what's called a static number. So to do that, what I can do is I can copy this, Control C, and I can come over here and I can paste it in K. But what I do is I come up here to paste, and if I come down to paste special, you'll notice right now it's a formula. But if I come here, I can actually do paste values. I can skip blanks, I can transpose, I can do a number of different things. I can multiply it by a number if I want. But if I paste the value here. Now if I do this, I've just pasted 657. It's no longer the formula, which is over here. And so notice when I change this number back to 250 and hit enter, my formula changed, but my paste special value did not change because it's an actual static number. Okay, that comes in handy later on when you don't want the formula to calculate anymore. You just want to use the number and you want it to be static. That's called paste special value. Okay. All right, we're going to close out of this and we're going to open up a new document. The document that I'm going to open up right now is called absolute value, or I'm sorry, absolute reference. So in that folder, you will see something called absolute reference sheet. So we're going to open up that document. And this is actually an important topic for people to understand as they get more advanced in Excel. When you're dealing with formulas, sometimes the reference of the formula is not quite right. And what I've been given a lot of data from people that, one person created the Excel spreadsheet and then they went and moved on to a different job. And now they need to make changes to it, and the person wasn't familiar with Excel, and then all of a sudden the calculations are calculating wrong. So I just want to show you what the differences are. So for example here, we're going to use a formula in these boxes right here of equals A1. And over here, this is going to pull this data. So I'm going to just show you what I'm talking about here. So in F2, I'm going to type equals A1. And what that's going to do is it's going to say whatever is in cell A1, return that. So if I do that, I hit return, you'll notice that A1 returns. Now if I drag that cell down, you'll notice that my formula, and it might be hard to see, but the formula here is equals A2, and the formula here is equals A3, and this one is A4, and so on. If I drag it to the right, you'll notice that this formula now is, instead of the number changing, the letter is changing. So in this case now, it's B1, and this cell, it's C1, and this one is D1. Okay, so if I drag all that down, you'll notice that basically all I have done is I've copied this into this table. Well, there are times where you want Excel to do that. And to be honest with you, the majority of the time, that's what you want. But there are times where you want to lock Excel so that it's only looking at one certain part of the formula. So for example, on this one, I'm going to type equals $1. And the $sign locks the number. So watch what happens here. If I do this and then I bring it down, you'll notice that A1, and then this is still A1, this is still A1, this is still A1, this is still A1. So the number got locked to 1. It will always be 1. If I drag it across, though, notice that the letter changed. The number didn't. So it's still looking at B1. And if I drag this down, you will notice that it's really only looking at this column or this row right here, because I have locked the row to 1. Let me show you what happens if I instead, this time, I'm going to lock the column. I'm going to lock the column to A. So in this case, I'm going to do equals A1. And if I drag that down, notice that the number changed, but the column stayed A1. If I drag it over to the right, notice that oops, you know what? I didn't lock the cell. My fault. Let me try this again. $A1. And then let me bring this down. Okay. Then when I bring it across, notice that the column A stayed the same. The number is the same, but then when I drag it down, the number changes. The column stayed the same, but the number changes. So in this case, I'm only looking at this data right here. So you'll notice where the $sign is affects what's being locked. In the first case that I had, it was locking the row. In the second case I had, it was locking the column. Well, let's look at a third example here where we're going to lock both. So we're going to do equals $A$1. And you'll notice that it's locking A1. So basically here, no matter how I drag it, it's only looking at that cell right there with A1. Now you might be like, well, where is this? Why is this important? Well, I'm going to show you later on where this is really important, because when you're dragging formulas down, you might miss things if you're not locking cells, columns, and or rows. And another thing to show you on this is there's a function called FN and then F4. So if you hit FN and F4 on your computer screen, it will actually toggle between no $sign, $1 sign in the front, and then $2 signs. Okay, so that's just a little shortcut for you. But this is called an absolute reference, and it's basically, I call it locking columns or locking rows. Okay? So we're going to use this in a little bit as we move on. So I'm going to close this out. Well, before I do, are there any questions about that?
There's nothing in the chat right now.
Okay, then I'll move on to the next thing. Again, I'm not going to save it. And then I'm going to move on to the file that is called text file. So text functions. All right, so here, let me make this bigger for you so that you can see this. A lot of times people go, oh, Excel, it's all numbers and things like that. To be honest with you, I use Excel more to clean up data using text functions than I do with a lot of formulas and things like that. So I'm going to show you some formulas here that that we're going to use. I'm going to go to the first tab, which is called Trim and Proper. Okay. So what I have here is I have some names, and you'll notice kind of in the names we've got some extra fields in here. I've got an extra space in between here. I've got a space in between before Alex. I've got some that are lowercase, some that are uppercase. So I'm going to use a formula called trim, and I'm going to type the formula. Again, to start a formula, you need to use the equal sign, and then you type trim, and then it kind of tells you what it's looking for. It's looking for the text. So I'm going to choose this text right here, which is in A3, and then I have to do a close parenthesis, and then I'm going to hit enter. And if you notice what trim did there was it took out the spaces that were extra and it cleaned it up for me, okay? So I could very quickly do that for a very large sheet if needed to by using trim and just dragging it down like I did for all of those. Another great one is proper. If you notice my beginning Excel spreadsheet, it came with all capital letters. Well, unfortunately, when I did my mail merge, it still had all capital letters. It would have been nice if, it capitalized the first letter of the name and then the address and the street and everything was the proper case. Well, you can do that by using the formula called proper. So to do that, you type equals and then the word proper. And again, it's looking for text. So again, I'm going to do my text here of A3. I'm going to hit return. And if I do that, you'll notice that really it didn't do anything because this was already in proper case. It didn't take out my spaces. But if I come down here and drag it down, you'll notice now with Steve Jones and Carol Jones that it made Steve capitalize and Jones capitalize. Same thing with Carol and Jones on this one. Now, the beauty of formulas is you can actually use multiple formulas on this. The hard part is remembering how many parentheses you need. So we're going to try to do this. We're going to do equals, and we're going to do trim, and then we're going to do parentheses, and we're going to type proper parentheses. So you'll notice that I have the first formula, parentheses, second formula, parentheses. Now it's asking for text. So I'm going to go back to my A3 text, and then I'm going to put a closed parenthesis here. And I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but each set of parentheses is colored. So the ones around A3 actually are red. And you'll notice that I have one parenthesis there that is black. And I don't have a second parenthesis here yet. If I hit enter, it's going to play a nice little music for me, and it's going to say, hey, you forgot a parenthesis here. You got to make sure that if you have an open parenthesis, you have a closed parenthesis. So in this case, I actually need to put a second parenthesis here. And if you look, now I have a set of black parentheses and I have a set of red parentheses. So now when I hit enter, you'll notice that it took out the space and it made it proper. If I drag that down, you'll notice that all of those are now trimmed and they are proper. So now I could actually use that. I could copy those and paste value into another column, and then it would keep it that way. So probably what I would do is I would copy all of that and paste it into column A so that it replaced all the ones that are kind of messed up. Okay? So that's trim and proper. So the next one that I'm going to show you is left. Okay? If you notice here on left, we can do equals, and we can do a formula called left. And what that does is it's asking me what text do I want, and then how many numbers do I want? Well, I'm doing left A3, and then I'm going to choose 5 because my zip code is just five numbers. And so if you notice here, what this did was it started from the left and it counted over 5 numbers, and then it returned that. So I got rid of the -1819 and all the other ones. And if it didn't have that, then it just did this. Okay? So that's a real nice function. There's something called write, and I was going to show you that, but basically it's the same thing. I'm going to show you a shorter version of being able to do what this long formula is. You don't really need this long formula anymore because of the way Excel does things. So for example here, I'm going to take this data, John Smith, Steve Adams, and Bill Jameson. And I'm going to copy that and I'm going to put it on a new worksheet here. So I'm going to bring this over here. Okay. All I did was I Control-C and pasted it in here. Now, there are times where you want to separate these out by first name and then have the last name in a separate column. Well, there's a couple of ways of doing this now in Excel. The first way is doing something called data, and you're doing what is called text to columns. So if I come here to text to columns and I choose that, I can go to next here and then I can say, how do I want this separated? Well, I want it separated whenever there's a space. So if I click on space here, notice that it puts a line between John and Smith, Steve and Adams, Bill and Jameson. And if I hit next here and then hit finish, notice that it separated those out into two different columns. So it was a nice, easy way to separate the names out. If you have first name and last name all in one column, you can separate them out. That's just one way of doing it. Okay. With Excel 2016, they have something that even is faster than text to columns if you want. If I want just the first name, if I start typing it here, and then I just go and type the next one here, it kind of figures out what I want. Actually, I don't know if I have enough data for it to do it. But what will happen is it will do what's called a flash fill, and it will actually come down here and go, oh, you're trying to get the first name out of this cell, and it will just list them all there, and you can just click on it and do that. I don't have it. Well, let me see if I can just add a whole bunch of data here and see if I can get it to work. Okay, that might be enough, hopefully. Let me go back here and try this again. So here I'm doing John, and I come here and I do Steve, and there we go. So now you can see on my screen, it's actually going, oh, you're trying to do the first names of everybody. And if I hit enter here, notice that it just pulled it down. That's called a flash fill, and that's what it was able to do. If I come here and I just do last name, and again, if I just give it a few examples, it goes, oh, you're looking for last names, and then I hit enter, and it will actually separate my data. So two different ways of getting the same result. I used to show a much more complicated formula, but in this case, I really don't need to do that. So I just want to show you kind of a quick version of that. Okay. All right, let's move on to count if. So I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to come back to my Excel document, my Excel folder, and I'm going to open up a document called count if function. And what's nice about this is a function that basically will go through and it will say, if it is something, count it. If not, don't count it. Okay? So here I have some student responses on a quiz. I have question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4, question 5, and you can see that I have different answers. So if I come here, I can do a formula, and I can do count if, and I can say bracket, and I'll give it the range B3 to B9, And then I have to give it a criteria. Count if it's A. Okay? Well, if you notice here, I can do that, and it says, okay, there is one A in that column. Now, if I drag this down, I actually have to go through here, and I have to change this to B, and change this formula to C, and change this formula to D. And if you notice, it counted the numbers. So you'll notice that there's one A, two B's, one C, and three D's. So that's right. Now, if I drag this across here, though, and I let it go, let's see if it counted it right. Well, in this one right here, I've got 0 A's, so that's right. I only have 2 B's. Well, there should be 3 B's. How come it only counted 2? There's no C's and there's 4 D's. So there's something wrong here. So we'll have to look at that one. On this one, I should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 A's and the rest zeros. So that's right. On this one, I should have 3 A's and I should have 3 C's and 1 D. Well, it didn't calculate it right. Why is it not calculating it right? Well, let's look at our formula. And this goes back to that absolute reference again, okay? So if you can kind of remember, I never locked the cells down. So if I look at my formula here, you will see, and I know it may be hard, the formula says count if B3 colon B9 is A. Well, if I go down, you'll notice that this one says count if B3 to B10 is B. So now it's only looking at this data right here. And so in this column, in this one in C13, the formula is only looking at these cells right here. That's why it's not getting that third B. And if I continue, that same thing. The C's are only looking at B5 to B11. It's looking at those and only counting C's. So I have to go back to my formula and I have to use my locking mechanisms. So on this, what I need to do is I need to put a $ between in front of B and in front of 3, and also a $ in front of B and in front of 9. And then when I drag that across, actually, I'm sorry, I don't want it to be in front of B because I want the columns to change. I don't want the numbers to change. So you'll notice here that I locked the number, but I did not lock the letter. So now when I drag this down, now when I go in here and I make this B, and this one say C, and this one say D, and now when I drag this across, now it's calculating correctly across all the fields. So again, I had to go in and I had to lock down the row numbers because I want the rows to only look at row 3 through 9. I didn't lock down the column because I want the formula to go to the next column over, next column over, next column over, next column over. So I locked the rows, but I did not lock the columns. And again, the formula is B $3 colon B $9 comma, and then the letter that I wanted to count, which in this case was A. Okay, so that is why it's important to understand that reference value that I have shown in the past. Okay. So that's a count if formula, just a very quick count if formula. I'm going to close this out, and we're going to go look at charts. Actually, you know what? I shouldn't have closed that out. I'm going to open up just an Excel document. How much time? Okay, so on this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to type just very quickly some data so that I can make a quick chart out of it. Okay, so on this, and you can do this with me if you want. On this, I've got months, I've got yearbook, I've got football, and I've got band. And I've got January, and I'm going to show you just real quick again. I showed this in the basic class where you can drag down. And I'm going to go 20,000 here. I'm going to go 3,200, 8,450. In football, I've got 10,200, 11,300, 12,550. And then in band, I'm going to go 8,250, 9,800. It doesn't really matter what the numbers are. I'm just typing them in. Okay. So you'll notice here, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, hopefully, so that you can see it. And I'm going to make this so that you can see all of it. All right. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to center all of this data. And I'm going to put a border around it so that it kind of stands out a little bit. And you'll notice I have some numbers in here, but the numbers are not, I mean, they're numbers, but this is really how much money they made in each of these months. So what I can do is I can come up here to the number formulas, and I can say what type of numbers these are. Right now it's set to general, no specific. But I can say, okay, this is actually money. So I can click this button right here, this $, and it will put money in, it'll put a $sign and a comma in there. If I don't want the commas, I can click on, I can actually take out the commas and make it that way. But this is exactly what I want right here. I just want the $signs in here. Okay. So now the next thing that I want to do is I want to make a chart. And in the insert, on the insert tab, there is something called recommended charts, and there's a whole bunch of charts right here. And Excel has all kinds of charts that you can do. What you do is you select the data that you want, and you can actually go to recommended charts, and it will open up and it will show you different information. So like this one right here, it's making a bar graph of yearbook, football, and band over the different months. Maybe I want that. Or maybe I want it to be a line graph and I can see it over time. Or maybe I want to group it by what the by yearbook, by football, by band instead of the different months. I could do a stacked line bar graph. I can do a stacked area graph. There's pie charts. Obviously, with 3 sets of data here, it's usually probably not the best for a pie graph, but I could do that. But I'm just going to choose this first one here, which is called a clustered column. So I'm going to click on that, and you'll notice that very quickly it puts a graph in here for me. And I can go in here and I can change the title. I'm going to change it to money collected. And you can see here that the band, the yearbook has this much in January, this much in February, this much in March. I can change the color if I want. I can double click on these colors and I can change the color if I want to whatever color. Maybe I want yearbook to be red. I don't know. But you can kind of change the colors if you want. You can change the x-axis and also the y-axis amount if you wanted to, but very easy now in Excel to make a chart. Now you'll notice over here that there are different chart styles, and I just clicked on one and it actually put the dollar amount on my graph. Here's another one where it puts the dollar amount, but it puts it, you know, going up and down. Here's another one that it makes it a little bit different. I mean, you can make it all kinds of different graphs. And what's nice about this is live, so as I mouse over this, it'll show me what it's going to look like if I choose that style. So if I choose this style, and what's really nice is that this is dynamic. So if all of a sudden I said, oh, that's a mistake, it should be 10,000. Notice now my data changes on my chart because it's a dynamic chart. Okay. Okay, so we're almost coming up on our hour here, and I just want to show you a couple of things. You know, there might be stuff that you don't remember, and again, I encourage you to maybe go back and look at the video. But, you know, YouTube is a great resource, frankly, for Excel. If you ever have questions about, you know, okay, I don't remember how to do a mail merge. Well, just come to Excel or just come to YouTube and search it. There's all kinds of videos here of how to do this. If you can't, you know, if you don't want to use my video or whatever, there's all kinds of other videos that are available to you here. The other product that I wanted to show you just very quickly before we go is a product called ASAP Utilities. And it's located at asap-utilities.com. And for me to show you this, it's probably better if I open up my practice data sheet. So let me get to this. So ASAP Utilities is a product that basically has created multiple macros that you can use, and you can do all kinds of things. One of the ones that I use a lot is I will highlight the data and I will come up here to columns and rows, and I will say color each nth row a different color, and then I'll hit OK. So watch how quickly this now has made my data look a lot easier to look at because it's highlighted it in gray. You can do all kinds of different things. Here's a bunch of text functions that we that we just kind of used. Delete leading and trailing spaces. That's kind of like trim. Make first character uppercase, the rest lowercase. That's kind of like proper. If I need to change everything to uppercase, I can do that. And there's a lot of nice formulas in here that are very quick to use, and it's a product that I use all the time. So as you're getting better and more familiar with Excel, I highly recommend that you go to asap-utilities.com and download it. It's a really nice product that I use a lot. We're right at the 10 o'clock mark, so I'm going to stop here. I will stay on the line here if there's any questions that anybody else has, or I didn't cover something, or you need me to cover something else. I'd be happy to take a look at it. But again, thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and hopefully you learned a lot about Excel.